should cultivate a border crossing identity and discipline. And we'll talk about what I mean by that. So we're going to approach this idea of border crossing from a couple of angles, okay? First of all, Philippians 2:13, or else it's 3:21, says, "It is God who is at work within us, both to will and to work for his good pleasure." And so he starts with the ego on this process. This is exhibit A, I admit, okay? As a child, ego, narcissist, okay. My mother, my dad, my dog, my grandparents who existed for my indulgence, my books and my chair and my indoor stuff, and my little red wagon, in my yard, with my leaves and my fence, and across the fence was my neighbor, who would come over when I wanted her to come and play, and she would stay until things didn't go so well, and then she'd stomp off and go home, or maybe she wouldn't, and I just wouldn't invite her back next time. But this was my world, and it was working out great for me, okay? So I was learning what I liked and how I felt safe and how I was comfortable, and let's call that preferences. And I was learning how to get that, and let's call that control. So that was just working out great until something catastrophic happened, a baby sister, and I had to share. And she wouldn't go home like the neighbor girl. And if I got mad at her, I couldn't send her back home across the fence. She was there all the time, and I had to learn to share, and that was uncomfortable. I had to, our parents wanted us to get along. This looks happy, but it's a headlock. And in the family portrait, even, it wasn't just symbolic, it's actually physical. I had to move over and make room for this other person. So my sort of me concern grew to include a she concern, and that was really uncomfortable. Then as time went on, a third sister was born, but she's the third, so we couldn't find any photos. But you know what? It was hard. It was really hard, okay? And we didn't always get along. I mean, my parents wanted us to, and they told us to, and we knew that was expected of us, and we had to do that, okay? And as I was growing up, then I met Jesus, and that's a good thing, because I needed him. And he taught me that just giving up preferences and control was not something that just my parents demanded of me, and it wasn't something that would just keep us from bickering. I actually had to give up preferences because he told me to, and as I read his word, I read things like, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. And if I think about sisterly love, that was kind of tough because it wasn't always readily apparent. Sisterly love, it was hard. That verse goes on, give preference to one another in honor. So I have to give up preference, have to give up control. Several people have mentioned today, the very first thing today, by Tom this morning, to be submissive and have an attitude of submissiveness. We accept that as individuals, the Lord works in us and he presses us in sanctification through giving up preferences and control. We accept that. And as we're children, we develop not just me, but we. We have this idea of we. And if you think about it, this idea of we is just shared preferences, though we might not always agree on what that is, but we have a tolerable range of disagreement that we accept, and it's means of control. How do you go about getting what you need or want, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable? But if you think about group as just shared preferences and control, you could think of this as culture. Okay, and culture is a slippery word. It's big, it's little, you can slice it and dice it, you can make it big like on a national scale. You could say the culture of the Western Hemisphere, and somehow we all know what that means. But we have a boundary around us and them, and this is safe. Inside this circle is safety, because we can predict what other people like and want and how they're going to get it. And outside of the boundary, that's sort of a danger zone. So I think about the boundary and crossing the boundary as being really important to our personal development as individuals, but also really important to our group development, because this is where we're safe, this is where we get our way, and out there, we have to give up control We have to give up preferences. I would even go so far as to say that ethnocentrism, this preference for us, is just ego writ large.